I am Samantha Wilson, 32 years old. And until recently, I was married to David for 7 years. I supported him through unemployment, while maintaining our lifestyle with my marketing career. His father, Harold, and I shared a special bond that David secretly resented. When Harold died and left David $62 million, everything changed overnight. The caring husband I knew vanished, replaced by a cruel stranger who sneered, "You are useless to me now," as he threw me out. Little did he know Harold had planned for this betrayal all along. If you are watching this video, drop a comment letting me know where you are viewing from. Hit that like button, and subscribe to hear how karma delivered the most satisfying justice. When my ex discovered what the will actually said, I grew up in a middle-class family in Connecticut, where hard work was valued above all else. My parents sacrificed to give me opportunities they never had, including a college education. I graduated with a business management degree and quickly found success in marketing. Numbers always made sense to me, and I had a knack for organization and financial planning that served me well professionally. Even in college, friends came to me for budgeting advice. Deep down, I dreamed of starting my own consulting business someday. But that dream got pushed aside when I met David. Our paths crossed at a friend's birthday party 7 years ago. David stood out immediately with his charismatic smile and ability to command attention in any room. He was handsome, creative, and talked passionately about his ambitions in architectural design. When he approached me with 2 glasses of wine and a charming line about saving me from boring conversation, I was instantly drawn to him. Architecture is about creating spaces that change how people feel. He told me that night, "I want to design buildings that inspire people." His passion was magnetic. We talked until the party ended, and he asked for my number as we left. Our chemistry was undeniable, and after 6 months of dating, David proposed during a weekend trip to a beachside town. The ring was modest but beautiful, and I said yes without hesitation, believing I had found my partner for life. Our wedding was small but joyful. Looking back now, there were signs I chose to ignore. David had changed jobs twice during our short courtship, always with stories about difficult bosses or companies that failed to recognize his talent. I believed in him completely and was certain his career would eventually take off. The pattern continued after marriage. David would start a job with enthusiasm, then gradually grow frustrated and quit or get fired within months. He always had explanations that sounded reasonable at the time, but our financial stability rested entirely on my shoulders. I took on extra projects and worked longer hours to compensate, telling myself it was temporary. David assured me his big break was just around the corner. "When my career takes off, I will take care of you the way you deserve." He would promise. I believed him because I wanted to. My first meeting with Harold Wilson, my father-in-law, was intimidating. He was a successful businessman, with a reputation for being demanding and direct. David had warned me that his father was difficult to please, and I was nervous about making a good impression. To my surprise, Harold and I connected immediately. He asked thoughtful questions about my career, and listened with genuine interest. After dinner, he invited me to see his home office, where he showed me his collection of business books, many of which I had read. "You understand the value of financial responsibility," Harold remarked. "That is something I have tried to teach David for years." Over time, our relationship grew. Harold invited us for Sunday dinners. That became a tradition. While David often found excuses to step away early, Harold and I would discuss business trends and investment strategies. He began mentoring me informally, recommending books and sharing wisdom from his decades of experience. "You remind me of myself at your age," he told me once. "The difference is, you have empathy to balance your ambition." David grew increasingly resentful of our connection. He would make dismissive comments about our conversations and accuse me of trying to impress his father. What he failed to see was that Harold simply appreciated my genuine interest in learning. As years passed, our financial struggles intensified. David remained unemployed for longer periods, and his job searches became increasingly half-hearted. When I gently suggested he might consider positions outside architecture, he accused me of not believing in him. Our arguments about money became more frequent and heated. "You make me feel like a failure," he would say. "Do you know what it is like living in your shadow?" The truth was that I was exhausted from carrying the financial burden alone. I took on a management position that required longer hours and more travel, Though the promotion helped our finances, it put additional strain on our marriage. David claimed I was prioritizing work over our relationship, never acknowledging that my hard work was keeping us afloat. 3 years into our marriage, Harold was diagnosed with terminal cancer. The prognosis was grim, giving him less than a year. The news devastated both David and me, but we processed our grief differently. I immediately stepped up to help, with hospital visits and appointments, while David seemed to withdraw emotionally. Harold's illness revealed more about David's character. During family gatherings, David performed grief dramatically when others were watching, but checked his phone constantly when he thought no one was looking. He arrived late to hospital visits and left early, always with plausible excuses. Meanwhile, Harold and I grew closer. During his lucid moments between treatments, he shared stories about his life and business philosophy. He confided concerns about David's approach to money and responsibility. "I love my son," Harold told me during one private conversation, "but I worry about his judgment, especially when it comes to finances." In his final weeks, Harold asked to speak with me alone. His once powerful frame was now frail, but his mind remained sharp. He thanked me for bringing stability to David's life, and for being the daughter he never had. Something in his expression suggested he wanted to say more, but he simply squeezed my hand and said, "Trust that I see everything clearly." When Harold passed away, I was at his bedside. David arrived 20 minutes after his father had already gone, having delayed at a coffee shop, because hospitals make him uncomfortable. I held Harold's hand until the end, promising him I would look after David and honor his memory. I had no idea then how prophetic that moment would become. The funeral was held at Harold's favorite church, filled with business, associates, friends and family members. I spent days helping arrange the service, selecting music Harold would have appreciated, and ensuring every detail honored his memory. David contributed little to the planning, claiming grief made it difficult for him to focus on practical matters. I delivered a heartfelt eulogy that brought many to tears, speaking about Harold's wisdom, generosity, and the profound impact he had on my life. David sat in the front row, occasionally dabbing at dry eyes with a handkerchief. After the service, most condolences were directed to me rather than David, which I noticed bothered him enormously. At the reception, David remained distant, mingling with guests while I handled the caterers, thanked people for coming, and ensured Harold's wishes for the gathering were fulfilled. Several of Harold's closest friends embraced me warmly, saying he thought of you as a daughter. Each comment seemed to darken David's mood further. 2 days after the funeral, we met with Harold's attorney for the reading of the will. The office was somber and formal, with family members seated around a large mahogany table. The attorney, Mr. Lawson, began with standard legal language, before reaching the distribution of assets to my son, David Wilson. I leave the sum of $62 million. The room fell silent. David's expression transformed instantly, from performative grief to stunned elation. He gripped my hand so tightly it hurt, but I was too shocked to react. Harold had been successful, but none of us had any idea he was worth that much. Mr. Lawson continued reading, detailing smaller bequests to charities and longtime employees. I noticed his careful wording about David's inheritance, mentioning provisions and conditions within the attached documents. But in the moment, the significance escaped me. David certainly was not listening to these details, his mind already racing with possibilities. "We need to celebrate," David announced as soon as we left the rabble attorney's office. Without consulting me, he made reservations at the most expensive restaurant in the city, ordering champagne and calling friends to join us. His grief had vanished completely, replaced by euphoric plans for how to spend his newfound wealth. In the next morning, I woke to find David on the phone with a luxury car dealership. By afternoon, he had purchased a $200,000 sports car, without discussing it with me. When I expressed surprise at the impulsive purchase, he dismissed my concerns. "It is my inheritance," he said, with an edge I had never heard before. "I do not need permission to spend it." Within days, financial changes became apparent. David moved large sums of money into new accounts with only his name. When I logged into our joint banking app, I discovered passwords had been changed. He dismissed my questions, saying he was organizing things and would explain later. New people suddenly appeared in our lives. David reconnected with old friends I had never heard him mention before. Business associates materialized, with investment opportunities that needed immediate attention. Our home, once peaceful, was constantly filled with these strangers, discussing deals and opportunities. David's spending escalated dramatically. Designer clothes replaced his entire wardrobe. He spoke of buying vacation properties in exotic locations. Dinners at exclusive restaurants became nightly occurrences, rarely with me invited. When I asked about these expenditures, David acted annoyed. "Do you know how much money I have now?" "This is nothing," he said dismissively. "You need to adjust your thinking." I tried to reconnect with him, believing grief and sudden wealth were causing temporary behavior changes. I prepared his favorite meal one evening, setting the table with candles and wine, and he never showed up. My calls went to voicemail. He returned, home after midnight, smelling of expensive cologne and alcohol, mentioning something about an investment dinner before falling asleep. The next morning, I suggested we talk about our future plans. Now that our financial situation had changed so dramatically, perhaps I could reduce my working hours. Maybe we could finally start the family we had discussed years ago. David gave vague, non-committal responses. "We have plenty of time to figure that out," he said, already scrolling through his phone. "I need to focus on managing this money right now." I gently suggested grief counseling, noting the dramatic change in his behavior. Might be related to losing his father. David scoffed at the idea. "I do not need a therapist," he snapped. "I need you to stop analyzing me and give me some space." I closed the laptop and leaned forward, looking each of them in the eye in turn. "For 15 years, you have lived your lives as if I did not exist. You celebrated holidays, shared milestones, supported each other through hardships. You were a family in every sense of the word. Just without me, and that was your choice. Nothing is happening to our marriage," he said coldly, "but something is happening with you. You have become controlling since the money came in. Controlling. I have barely seen you for weeks." I replied, shocked by the accusation. "Maybe you are jealous," he suggested with a cruel smile. "Maybe you cannot handle that I am finally successful, while you have been lording your career over me for years." The argument escalated until David said something that stopped me cold. "Maybe you are finally seeing me for who I truly am, and not who you tried to shape me into." 3 weeks after the funeral, I finally confronted him directly, after another night of him returning home in the early morning hours. I asked what was happening to our marriage. I stood alone in our kitchen, feeling as though I was looking at a stranger, wearing my husband's face. David's presence in our home became increasingly rare. Some nights, he did not come home at all, offering thin excuses about late meetings or drinks with investors. When I asked, my calls went unanswered for hours, sometimes days when I sent texts expressing concern. His replies were terse and annoyed. Our joint checking account, which once contained our shared savings, that was nearly empty. Large withdrawals appeared with no explanation. When I asked David about these financial changes, he brushed me off, saying he had moved funds to better investment vehicles, and that I would not understand the complexities. One morning, I found a receipt in his jacket pocket for a $5,000 dinner at a restaurant we had once considered for our anniversary, but deemed too expensive. The bill included $200 champagne and several entrees. When confronted, David claimed it was a business dinner, but could not explain why it occurred at 11 p.m. on a Saturday. My suspicions grew when credit card statements arrived, showing charges for jewelry I had never received, and hotel rooms in our own city. David had also made a down payment on a beachfront property in Malibu, without mentioning it to me. The real estate agent called our home to confirm details, and surprised when I knew nothing about the purchase. "Your husband said it was a surprise for the family," she said apologetically. The confirmation of my fears came in the form of a misdirected text message. David's phone chimed one morning while he was in the shower, thinking it might be important. I glanced at the screen to see a message from someone named Veronica. "Last night was amazing, miss you already. When can you get away from her again?" My hands trembled as I scrolled through previous messages, each one more damning than the last photos. Intimate conversations, plans for their next meeting, all while I had been working to support us before the inheritance. The evidence suggested the affair had begun shortly after Harold's funeral. That same day I received a call from my friend Kimberly, hesitant and uncomfortable. "I do not know how to tell you this," she began, "but I saw David yesterday at Riverside Mall with a woman. They were very affectionate. I thought you should know. When David returned home that evening, I placed his phone and the credit card statements on the kitchen table. I described what Kimberly had seen and asked for the truth, keeping my voice steady despite my crumbling interior. David's reaction shifted from shock to denial to anger within seconds. He accused me of spying on him and invading his privacy. When I remained calm and pointed to the evidence, his strategy changed. Fine, he finally said with cold detachment. So, what if I am seeing someone? I deserve to be happy you are married. I reminded him, still struggling to process his callousness. To someone who cannot give me what I need. He replied, Veronica understands me in ways you never could. She appreciates my vision and supports my ambitions without judgment. The cruelty escalated as he compared us, citing Veronica's youth, appearance, and willingness to live life to the fullest. Unlike my constant worrying about budgets and responsibility, each word was precisely targeted to cause maximum pain. I settled for you, David continued, his voice dripping with contempt. You were safe and stable when I needed that. I resented how my father preferred you, how he would listen to your opinions over mine. Did you enjoy playing the perfect daughter? Never had I supported you for years, I said, fighting back tears. I believed in you when no one else did. You supported me because you could control me. He countered, you loved, holding your success over my head, making me feel small. Admit it, you stayed because you thought Harold would eventually leave us money, and you wanted your share. His accusations were so outlandish, so contrary to reality that I could barely form a response. He was rewriting our entire history, casting himself as the victim and me as a manipulative gold digger, when I had been the one, working 60-hour weeks to keep our household afloat, while he pursued one failed venture after another. Despite the devastating revelations, some part of me still wanted to save our marriage. I suggested counseling, reminding him of the good times we had shared, and the promises we had made to each other. I offered to sign a post-nuptial agreement, if he was concerned about the money. David laughed coldly at my suggestions. Counseling will not fix this. I have moved on. You should too. As the reality of the situation fully hit me, I felt the room spinning. My breath came in short gasps, as the first panic attack I had ever experienced took hold. David watched impassively as I struggled to breathe, making no move to help or comfort me. When I had finally collected myself, David went upstairs and returned with a suitcase, which he began filling with my clothes from our closet. I have contacted divorce lawyers, he said matter-of-factly. They will be in touch. I am prepared to offer you a generous settlement. If you make this easy and go quietly, the house is in my name, so you need to leave tonight. As he shoved the hastily packed suitcase toward me, he delivered the words that would haunt me for months. You are useless to me now. Standing in the doorway of what had been our home for 5 years, I looked back at the stranger who had replaced my husband, and realized that money had not changed David. It had merely revealed who he truly was all along. The first night, after being thrown out of my home, I sat in my car for hours, unable to process what had happened. Eventually, I called my friend Jessica, who immediately offered her spare room. When I arrived at her apartment, suitcase in hand, she took one look at my face and wrapped me in a hug, without asking questions. But the next morning, my body reacted to the trauma with physical symptoms. My hands would not stop shaking. Nausea made eating impossible. The world seemed distant and unreal, as if I were observing everything through thick glass. Jessica brought me tea and toast, sitting quietly beside me as I stared blankly at the wall. He threw me away like I was nothing. I finally whispered 7 years together, and he threw me away in an instant. The following days passed in a blur of shock and confusion. I called in sick to work, unable to imagine sitting through meetings and making decisions, when I could barely decide whether to get out of bed each morning. My appearance, once a priority, became irrelevant. I wore the same sweatpants for days, not bothering to style my hair or apply makeup. Jessica gently encouraged me to eat small meals and drink water, but everything tasted like cardboard. Sleep came only in brief, nightmare-filled intervals. I would wake gasping, dreaming of falling or being abandoned in empty places. The weight of betrayal felt like a physical pressure on my chest, making each breath an effort. After a week of existing in this suspended state, practical concerns forced me back to functionality. I needed a place to live my salary, while Good could not afford anything comparable to the home I had shared with David, especially in our expensive city. I spent hours scrolling through rental listings, eventually finding a small, one-bedroom apartment with a manageable security deposit. Collecting my belongings proved another humiliation. I coordinated with David via text to arrange a time when he would be out, entering what had been my home with Jessica and her boyfriend. To help carry boxes felt surreal. Many of my personal items, including family heirlooms and jewelry passed down from my grandmother, were mysteriously missing. Photos I had carefully framed were found in the trash. My home office had been completely emptied, with my computer nowhere to be found. "He is doing this deliberately," Jessica said, watching me discover my garden tools snapped in half. "He wants to hurt you." The official divorce papers arrived by courier. 2 weeks after I had moved into my new apartment, David had retained Thomas Bernard, a notoriously aggressive divorce attorney known for representing wealthy clients in contentious splits. The legal language was cold and dismissive, referring to our marriage as irreconcilably broken, and proposing terms that would leave me with virtually nothing. I struggled to find legal representation I could afford. After several consultations with attorneys, who required retainers far beyond my means, I found Melissa Kwan, a recently licensed lawyer willing to take my case at a reduced rate. Her inexperience concerned me, but her genuine outrage at the proposed settlement terms was reassuring. "This is completely unfair," she said, reviewing the documents. "He is claiming you contributed nothing to the marriage assets, despite supporting him through years of unemployment, and he is offering no alimony, despite the length of your marriage and the significant income disparity. The proposed settlement offered me a one-time payment of $20, in exchange for vacating all claims to marital property and signing a non-disclosure agreement. The amount would barely cover a few months of expenses in our city." My lawyer was shocked by the terms. "He expects you to restart your life with practically nothing. After 7 years of marriage, this is insulting," Melissa said, "and the NDA is clearly to prevent you from discussing his behavior publicly." My financial reality became increasingly precarious. Our joint accounts had been drained. My credit cards were suddenly canceled without warning. I calculated how long my personal savings would last, while covering rent, utilities, and legal fees. The answer was alarming. Less than 6 months job hunting, while emotionally devastated, proved challenging. My performance at my current position was suffering, due to lack of sleep and constant anxiety. Several meetings with my manager had ended with warnings about missed deadlines and distracted behavior. The contrast between my struggle and David's luxury was stark. Social media showed him vacationing in Europe with Veronica, dining at Michelin-starred restaurants and attending exclusive events. After a month of legal back and forth, Melissa delivered difficult advice. Fighting a prolonged legal battle against someone with David's resources would likely leave me bankrupt before we ever reached a favorable judgment. "He can outspend you indefinitely on legal fees," she explained gently sometimes. "Accepting an unfair settlement is the only practical option, when the alternative is financial ruin." With reluctance and a profound sense of injustice, I agreed to accept a slightly improved offer of $35 and 6 months of health insurance coverage. The terms still included the NDA, which I resented but could not afford to fight. The day I signed the preliminary settlement agreement, my hand shook so badly I could hardly form my signature. David was not present, having delegated everything to his attorneys. I felt hollowed out, as if something essential had been scraped from inside me. For the final divorce meeting, I arrived at the attorney's office early, dressed in the most professional outfit I still owned. David arrived 20 minutes late, emerging from a luxury car where Veronica waited, scrolling through her phone. He wore an expensive new suit and designer watch, looking tanned and rested. The sight of him so apparently unaffected by destroying our marriage sent a physical pain through my chest. Inside the conference room, David performed affable politeness for the attorneys present. "I hope you are doing well, Samantha," he said, with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "You look good." The meeting proceeded efficiently, with documents passed for signatures and brief explanations of final terms. I noticed Mr. Lawson, Harold's attorney, who had read the will, observing the proceedings with an odd expression. When David rushed the process, clearly eager to be finished, Mr. Lawson's eyebrows raised slightly, but he said nothing. As I signed the last document officially ending my marriage, David immediately stood and headed for the door. My lawyer will handle the rest. I have another appointment. Before leaving, he turned back briefly. I wish you the best, Samantha. I truly do. The insincerity of his words was the final insult. I sat motionless as he departed, feeling simultaneously destroyed and strangely liberated. The marriage that had defined the last 7 years of my life was officially over and ended, not with mutual respect, but with calculated cruelty. 3 days after the divorce was finalized, I received an unexpected call from a man who introduced himself as Walter Green, Harold's personal attorney. I handled Mr. Wilson's most private legal affairs for 30 years. He explained, there are additional matters regarding his estate that require your attention. Would you be willing to meet with me? My initial reaction was suspicion. Was this another tactic from David to extract something more from me? I hesitated, explaining that the divorce was already finalized. This is unrelated to your divorce proceedings. Walter assured me, or rather, it is related, but not in the way you might think. Please, Miss Wilson, this meeting will be to your benefit. Curiosity overrode caution, and I agreed to meet him the following day at his office downtown. The address, LED, me, to a small but elegant law firm specializing in estate planning and trusts. Walter Green proved to be an elderly gentleman, with kind eyes and a deliberate manner of speaking. Thank you for coming, he said, showing me to a comfortable chair. Before we begin, I need to ask, did David initiate your divorce, or did you? The question seemed odd, but I answered honestly. He did. He threw me out of our home, and had already contacted divorce lawyers before telling me he wanted to end our marriage. Walter nodded, making a note. And, did you contest the divorce or try to reconcile again? I explained that I had initially suggested counseling and attempted to save the marriage, but David had been adamant about ending things quickly. I see, Walter said, seeming relieved by my answers. That confirms what I suspected. He opened a drawer and removed a sealed envelope. Harold Wilson was not just my client, but my friend. For 3 decades, he confided in me his concerns about his son's character and financial judgment. Harold created a secondary will document with specific instructions that it only be revealed under certain conditions. My confusion must have been evident, as Walter continued with a gentle smile. Miss Wilson, may I ask a direct question? Did you actually read the complete will yourself? Or did you rely on the summary provided at the reading? I was given a copy, but with everything happening so quickly, I trailed off, realizing I had never read the document in its entirety, assuming the attorney had covered all relevant points. During the reading, Walter let out a surprised laugh. Did you even read the will? He asked incredulously. He opened the envelope and placed a document before me. The $62 million inheritance to David was indeed specified, but with conditions that were deliberately not emphasized. During the public reading, at Harold's instruction, my hands trembled as I read the highlighted section. In the aforementioned sum of $62 million is bequeathed to my son, David Wilson, conditional upon his remaining married to Samantha Wilson, for a minimum period of 5 years following my death. During this period, the principal shall be held in trust, with only income distributed. Should David initiate divorce proceedings or separation from Samantha within this 5-year period, 80% of the remaining principal and accumulated interest shall immediately revert to Samantha Wilson, to be placed in a trust under her sole control. Below this formal language was a personal letter from Harold, handwritten and addressed to me. Samantha, if you are reading this, then my son has made the choice I feared he would. I have watched you support David emotionally and financially for years, displaying the responsibility and character he lacks. I have observed his resentment of your relationship with me, and his entitlement regarding money he has not earned. This provision is not meant to trap either of you in an unhappy marriage, but to protect you. Should David reveal his true nature once wealth enters the equation, you have been more of a child to me than David, in many ways demonstrating the values I tried to instill in him. This money cannot buy happiness. But in your hands, I trust it will be used wisely. Forgive an old man's manipulation. But I had to ensure justice would prevail. Tears blurred my vision as I finished reading Harold's words. The room seemed to tilt around me as I realized the implications. Is this enforceable? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Completely, Walter confirmed. Harold created an ironclad trust with these specific conditions. David's lawyer at the will reading was legally obligated to disclose these terms to him, but he never mentioned any conditions. To me, I said, pieces suddenly falling into place. He rushed the divorce through as quickly as possible. Walter's expression darkened. That suggests David may have paid for information to be withheld, or discovered the terms afterward, and attempted to finalize the divorce before you became aware. Either scenario constitutes potential fraud. He leaned forward, placing a business card before me. I would be willing to represent you in this matter at minimal cost. Harold would have wanted me to ensure his wishes were honored. Before I could respond, my phone began vibrating continuously. Text messages and missed calls from David flooded the screen, each more desperate than the last. We need to talk immediately. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. Please call me. It's urgent. Walter observed the notifications with raised eyebrows. It appears David has just discovered your meeting with me that evening. As I sat processing the revelation in Jessica's apartment, the doorbell rang, repeatedly. Jessica looked through the peephole and turned to me with wide eyes. It's David, she whispered. He looks different when I finally agreed to speak with him. The contrast to our last encounter was shocking. Gone was the confident, cruel man who had discarded me. Before me stood someone pale and shaken, designer clothes wrinkled, hair unkempt. The arrogance had vanished from his posture. Samantha, please, he began, voice trembling. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. I've made a mistake, a huge mistake. What mistake exactly? I asked calmly, surprising myself with my steady voice. The divorce, he said quickly. It was hasty and unnecessary. I was confused, grieving my father. I wasn't thinking clearly. You seemed very clear when you told me I was useless to you, I replied. David flinched at his own words, thrown back at him. I didn't mean that I was under enormous pressure. The inheritance, the responsibility. I said terrible things I'll always regret. His performance might have been convincing if I hadn't just read Harold's letter. I studied David's face, seeing calculation behind the apparent contrition. I still love you, he continued desperately. We can fix this, we can reconcile and start over. I'll make everything up to you. I promise. I asked the question that would reveal everything. When did you find out about the clause in your father's will? His hesitation told me all I needed to know. The guilty flicker in his eyes confirmed Walter's suspicion that David had known about the condition, but had gambled. I wouldn't discover it until after the divorce was final. The divorce is already final, David, I said quietly. The facade crumbled instantly. David fell to his knees, all pretense abandoned. Please, you don't understand. I've already spent millions. I bought properties, invested in startups, made commitments. Veronica left when the money started to run out. I need your help, Samantha. We can remarry, satisfy the terms of the trust. You need my help, I repeated, the irony almost overwhelming. I got carried away, he pleaded, tears streaming down his face. The money, the attention, it was intoxicating. I wasn't myself. Looking at him begging on Jessica's apartment floor, I reflected on how differently I would have acted with sudden wealth. I would have secured our future, perhaps started the business I had dreamed of, maybe even helped David pursue his architectural ambitions. Legitimately, you were right about one thing, David, I said finally. I am useless to you now. David's desperate attempts to reconcile grew increasingly elaborate. In the days following our confrontation, expensive flower arrangements arrived daily at Jessica's apartment, until I requested the doorman refuse them. Jewelry appeared with notes begging for another chance. He waited outside my workplace, with grand gestures that embarrassed us both. When gifts failed to sway me, David enlisted mutual friends to plead his case. Most saw through his sudden change of heart, but a few suggested I consider reconciliation for both your sakes. None knew about the will's conditions, protected by legal confidentiality. His promises escalated to absurd proportions. He vowed to put all remaining assets in my name. He offered to sign a contract, giving me complete financial control. He suggested we renew our vows in an extravagant ceremony to prove his commitment. Each proposition revealed his focus remained entirely on the money, not on the relationship he had destroyed. Meanwhile, Walter Green moved swiftly to enforce the terms of Harold's will. We filed the necessary legal documents to activate the trust provision, triggering an immediate response from David's attorneys. They filed a countersuit, claiming fraud and undue influence, alleging I had manipulated Harold into creating the conditional bequest. The case revealed disturbing evidence about David's actions. Email records showed he had indeed paid Thomas Bernard a substantial bonus to withhold information about the will's conditions. Bank transfers documented. Millions already spent on luxury purchases and risky investments. Most damning was a text exchange with Veronica, discussing how to finalize the divorce. Before I discovered the inheritance conditions, the judge assigned to our case, a stern woman with 30 years of experience in family court, made her disapproval of David's behavior clear during hearings. When evidence of the attorney's ethical violations came to light, she referred the matter to the State Bar Association for investigation. After 3 months of legal proceedings, the court ruled entirely in my favor. The trust provision was deemed valid and enforceable, with David's attempts to circumvent it through deception constituting a clear violation of his father's legally expressed wishes. With the ruling finalized, I suddenly found myself responsible for managing nearly $50 million. The enormity of this change overwhelmed me initially. I had always been financially responsible, but this level of wealth required knowledge I didn't possess. Rather than making immediate decisions, I assembled a team of legitimate financial advisors, including a certified financial planner, tax attorney, and investment specialist with fiduciary responsibility. We developed a conservative strategy, focused on preserving capital while generating sustainable income. Unlike David's impulsive spending, I approached the inheritance methodically, allocating funds to various categories: secure investments, retirement planning, charitable giving, and a modest portion for personal use. I remained in my affordable apartment, unwilling to make major lifestyle changes, until I had fully processed everything that had happened. David's parents, who had remained distant during our marriage, suddenly became intensely interested in reconciliation. His mother called repeatedly, first attempting to reason with me about family loyalty, then suggesting I was being vindictive when I remained firm. They progressed to implied threats about contesting the will, followed by offers of a private settlement. If I would share the inheritance with their son, David made mistakes, but he's family. His mother insisted during one call, Harold would have wanted you to forgive him. Harold made his wishes very clear. I responded calmly. He wanted me to be protected from exactly this situation. Their final attempt was a carefully staged, accidental meeting at a restaurant, where they brought an apparently chastened David to apologize. Once more, I excused myself immediately, later sending a clear message through Walter, that all communication should go through our respective attorneys. Throughout this period, I gradually rebuilt connections with my own family, who had grown distant during my marriage, due to David's subtle isolation tactics. My parents were shocked by the full story, having seen only the curated version of our relationship I had presented over the years. We always sensed something was off, my mother admitted. But you seemed determined to make it work, so we didn't interfere. Friends I had neglected while working overtime to support David welcomed me back with open arms. Jessica continued to be my strongest supporter, offering perspective when I doubted myself, and celebrating small victories in my recovery. Therapy became an essential part of my healing process. Dr. Larson helped me recognize patterns of emotional manipulation I had accepted as normal, and the gradual erosion of my boundaries during the marriage. We worked through the trauma of betrayal and abandonment, building healthier expectations for future relationships. What's remarkable, Dr. Larson noted after several months, is not just that you survived this betrayal, but that you've maintained your compassion while setting necessary boundaries. As the legal dust settled, David's behavior grew increasingly erratic. Charm gave way to harassment. When his attempts at reconciliation failed, he spread rumors among acquaintances about me stealing his inheritance. Late-night phone calls came from unknown numbers, revealing his intoxicated state as he alternated between pleading and accusations. After he accidentally appeared at 3 different locations where I was meeting friends, I reluctantly filed for a restraining order. The court granted it immediately based on the evidence of persistent, unwanted contact and escalating behavior throughout this challenging period. I found myself returning to the business plan I had shelved years earlier, with the financial freedom to pursue it properly. I consulted with industry experts, refined my concept, and conducted thorough market research. The boutique consulting firm I had once dreamed of now seemed not only possible, but perfectly aligned with my strengths. I found an ideal location for a small office, designed the space to reflect professional warmth, and developed service packages targeting small businesses needing financial guidance, rather than trading on my sudden wealth. I built the business on my genuine expertise and work ethic. 6 months after launching, I secured my first major clients, businesses that took a chance on a new firm, based on personal recommendations, and my clear passion for helping others succeed financially. The positive feedback and referrals that followed validated that my success came from skill, rather than inheritance. When a local business magazine included my firm in a Startups to Watch feature, the satisfaction I felt far exceeded any emotion related to the inheritance. This was something I had built myself, based on knowledge I had earned through years of hard work. The contrast between David's approach to sudden wealth and my own could not have been starker. While he had sought immediate gratification and status, I focused on creating something sustainable that would benefit others. Money itself had never been the goal. It was merely a tool that enabled me to build something meaningful. 1 year after the divorce was finalized, I barely resembled the shattered woman who had signed those papers. The physical transformation reflected inner healing. I stood straighter, spoke more confidently, and smiled genuinely again. My new apartment, though modest compared to what I could afford, was decorated entirely to my taste, with no compromises to anyone else's preferences. My fuzz consulting business had expanded to a larger office downtown, with 3 employees. Each day brought new challenges that engaged my mind and talents fully. The confidence in my walk and voice was earned through overcoming adversity, rather than granted by wealth. Regular therapy had helped process the betrayal, without letting it define me. I developed daily practices that supported ongoing healing. Journaling to track my emotional progress, meditation to stay grounded amid major life changes, and building a support network of authentic friendships, based on mutual respect. Dating again came slowly and cautiously. My first attempts were coffee meetings that never progressed further, as I was still learning to trust my judgment of character. Eventually, I enjoyed a few pleasant dinner dates, with men who seemed genuinely kind, though I remained transparent about not being ready for a serious relationship. The best part about dating now, I told Jessica, is that I know exactly what my boundaries are, and feel no guilt about maintaining them. As my business thrived, I expanded services beyond my initial projections. The staff I hired brought complementary skills, creating a collaborative environment where everyone contributed to our success. Industry recognition came in the form of business awards and speaking invitations at conferences, validating that my vision had real value. 6 months into the business, I established the Harold Wilson Foundation, with a significant portion of the inheritance. The foundation focused on financial education for women, particularly those recovering from financial abuse or sudden economic changes. We offered scholarships for disadvantaged students pursuing business degrees, and mentorship programs for young entrepreneurs. Financial independence is about more than money, I explained at the foundation's launch event. It's about having the knowledge and confidence to make informed decisions about your future. The foundation became the most meaningful use of Harold's gift, transforming wealth into opportunity for others. Each scholarship recipient or successful mentee reinforced that true value comes from creating positive change, not accumulating possessions. Nearly 14 months after our divorce, I encountered David unexpectedly at a restaurant downtown. I had just finished a business lunch when I noticed him, sitting alone at the bar, staring into a half-empty glass. His appearance shocked me. The designer clothes replaced by wrinkled khakis and an untucked shirt. His once carefully styled hair now thinning and unkempt. He noticed me before I could decide whether to acknowledge him. After a moment's hesitation, he approached my table, a shadow of his former confidence evident in his hunched posture. "Samantha," he said quietly, "you look well up close." The changes were even more apparent. Fine lines had appeared around his eyes, and he had gained weight in a way that suggested stress, rather than contentment. "May I sit for a moment?" he asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. Against my better judgment, I nodded. The anger that had once burned so intensely had faded to something resembling indifference. "I filed for bankruptcy last month," he said without preamble. "The investments failed. The Malibu property was foreclosed. Veronica left 6 months ago for someone with better prospects." I remained silent, neither encouraging nor discouraging his confidences. I realize now what I threw away. He continued, eyes fixed on the table rather than meeting mine. "Not just the money, but everything else. Your support, your belief in me, the life we could have built together, for the first time since I had known him." David's words seemed genuinely reflective, rather than calculated for effect. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. "A real one. Not like before when I was just trying to get the money back. I was cruel to you. I betrayed you after years of your support. There's no excuse for how I treated you." I considered his words carefully before responding. "Thank you for saying that, David. My father was right about you," he admitted, "and about me. He saw who we both truly were." The conversation lapsed into silence, neither uncomfortable nor comfortable, simply existing in the space between two people who had once shared everything, and now shared nothing but a complicated history. "Would it be possible," David asked hesitantly, "for us to stay in touch, not to reconcile?" He added quickly, seeing my expression, "Just to talk occasionally as friends. Maybe someday." I took a moment to check my internal response to his request. The boundary felt clear and natural. "I don't think that would be healthy for either of us, David," I said gently. "I wish you well. Truly. I hope you find your way forward. But our paths need to remain separate." He nodded, accepting my decision without argument. As he stood to leave, I noticed the bill for his drink on the bar. Making a split-second decision, I signaled the bartender and quietly paid it before David could notice. Not out of obligation or pity, but as a final gesture of closure. Walking home afterward, I reflected on how completely my understanding of worth had transformed. For years, I had tied my value to what I could provide others, the support I could offer, the stability I could create. David had defined worth through external validation, possessions, and status. Harold had seen through both of us, recognizing that true character reveals itself, not when we have nothing, but when we suddenly have everything. Money had not corrupted David. It had merely accelerated and amplified who he already was. The inheritance that David had viewed as an endpoint had become my beginning. It provided not just financial security, but an opportunity to create something meaningful that aligned with my values. The wealth itself was not the gift. The freedom to pursue purpose was. The greatest irony was that in discarding me, David had lost everything, while through being discarded, I had found myself. The person I had become after weathering betrayal was stronger, wiser, and more authentic than the woman who had desperately tried to save a marriage with someone who valued wealth over connection. Life after devastation had revealed possibilities I could never have imagined. During those dark days after being thrown out of my home, the journey from breakdown to breakthrough had transformed not just my circumstances, but my fundamental understanding of resilience and self-worth. Looking toward the future, I felt genuine optimism, not because everything was perfect, but because I had discovered my capacity to create meaning from misfortune. Harold's posthumous gift had not been the money itself, but the opportunity to rebuild on a foundation of authenticity rather than accommodation. The betrayal that once defined my story had become merely a chapter in a much larger narrative of growth and self-discovery. For that unexpected transformation, I felt a bittersweet gratitude. I wonder if any of you have experienced a situation where betrayal eventually led to something better in your life. Has anyone else discovered their strength only after being pushed to their breaking point? Share your stories in the comments below. If this video resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories about finding unexpected strength in difficult situations. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes losing what you thought you wanted can lead you to what you truly deserve.